Hello and thank you for joining us on the Thursday edition of Journalist Hangout. I'm Ayodele Ozubaku. Today on the program, 1 year after Nigerians relive memories of EndSars protests and Carnage, insist on police reform and attitudinal change. I'll be hanging out with Babajide Kolade Otitoju and Tunde Abato. So if you're ready, let the hangout start now. For staying with us, call it a revolution or a civil rights movement. The EndSars protest that rocked Nigeria in October 2020 is regarded as a watershed in the country's history. The protests, which took place across major Nigerian cities, climaxed at the Lekki Toll Gate in Lagos on the 20th of October, and the widespread destruction and killings, including burning of TVC Communications studio on the 21st of October. As Nigerians relive memories of the protest and the attendant carnage 1 year after, citizens have insisted on police reform and attitudinal change. On a somber note, let's relive some of the moments of the protests with you, with these silent visuals. It was unarguably the finest and the best studio in Africa.
Yes.
And it's so sad. Yesterday, last week, when we went there together, I was almost in tears. That's Nigerians. Somebody will see this.
It looked like a scene from
Syria.
the war zone in Syria. But
At that studio, so some people can come in and
it's terrible. It's terrible
actually
to
destroy
to
billions.
to imagine that human beings, not animals, can carry out that kind of destruction. But it's a day to talk about those things. So
Why?
EndSars.
So when this thing now happened on the last year, and at this point in time, what is the most enduring memory of EndSars events of last year that you had?
So many things that we can talk about. The killings at TVC, the killings across the country, policemen killed. There was even the case of some people who roasted the policemen that they killed and ate their body parts.
Ibadan.
There are so many things that one can talk about, but definitely no one wants to see this kind of thing happen again.
Meanwhile, 1 year after the defining moment in our history, many Nigerians are asking if anything has changed regarding what the protest aimed to address. Here are the highlights of the issue and the unanswered question about police reform in the country.
The Special Anti-Robbery Squad, SARS, is a unit of the Nigerian police established in 1992 to combat armed robbery and violent crimes like kidnapping. As a child of necessity, SARS used unconventional and conventional methods to carry out its responsibility of ridding Nigeria of violent crimes. Over the years, the unit derailed and became notorious for wanton brutality, harassment, and human rights abuses. Before long, SARS came under fire for cases of extortion, harassment, intimidation, abuse of power, and outright murder. This brought about constant agitations by the citizens for the reform or outright scrapping of the unit. An online movement, the hashtag EndSars, began in 2018 to protest against brutality by the police unit. In October 2020, a footage of SARS officers in Lagos pulling two men out of a hotel to the street and shooting one of them went viral on social media. The footage provoked outrage and led many to share stories of brutality by a unit notorious for unduly profiling young people.
What happened in October 2020 was that the streets, the protests moved from social media to the streets.
The hashtag was resurrected, this time leading to mass protests with one goal, the disbandment of SARS. Demonstrations against SARS took place in different states across the country. Many eminent Nigerians, especially artists, joined the protests, condemning police brutality and calling for the scrapping of SARS.
Issue of stopping Nigerians on the streets with laptops, and those in cars, especially those who look young and maybe vulnerable. That the police feels they can actually do certain things to them and they get away with it. So this has continued unabatedly until, of course, the dam burst.
President Muhammadu Buhari summoned the then Inspector General of Police, Muhammad Adamu, directing him to scrap SARS and effect some reforms in the police. On Sunday, the 11th of October, the Inspector General of Police announced the dissolution of the Special Anti-Robbery Squad, SARS, across the 36 states of the country and the FCT with immediate effect. But the EndSars protests raged on across the country, despite the scrapping of the unit. The protesters were against the reintegration of the same officers into other units of the police force.
On the 19th of October, they brought out implementation of the 5-for-5. They actually told, since the government wasn't showing leadership, they didn't know what to do beyond just saying that, oh, we've accepted it and sending in thugs and police to harass them. They gave the action the government needed to take, the action that needed to be taken immediately, the action that the short to mid-term actions that needed to be taken, and medium to long-term actions that needed to be taken.
Major roads were blocked, causing intense traffic as protesters marched to different strategic locations in cities like Lagos and Abuja. President Muhammadu Buhari spoke again on the matter, saying the scrapping of SARS is the first step in his commitment to substantive police reforms.
With regards to the welfare of police personnel, the National Salaries, Income and Wages Commission has been directed to expedite action on the finalization of the new salary structure of the members of the police force.
While the president was speaking, protesters were on the streets in different locations. The protests raged on across the country until the 20th of October. In Lagos State, Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu declared a 24-hour curfew that was to take place from 4 p.m. that day. Many protesters dispersed from the streets they had occupied, but at the Lekki Toll Gate, protesters remained. Hundreds of people from all backgrounds showed up each day, and many stayed overnight. The curfew was later delayed to 9 p.m. after many people complained that it was impossible to get home before 4 p.m., given the traffic in Lagos. The events that followed have been controversial, with different tales of what occurred. The Nigerian army was accused of firing at unarmed protesters. Witnesses at the scene said that between 6:30 p.m. and 7 p.m., well before the 9 p.m. curfew, men dressed in military fatigues arrived in about 5 trucks and began firing in the air and at protesters. But the federal government continues to deny these claims. Minister of Information and Culture, Lai Mohammed, insists the claims are false.
The federal government remains proud of the security agencies for acting professionally and showing utmost restraint all through the EndSars protest and the ensuing violence and action that saved lives and properties. 5. The 6 soldiers and the 7 policemen who died during the EndSars protests are human beings with families, even though the human rights organizations and CNN simply ignore their deaths, choosing instead to trumpet a phantom massacre.
The controversy seemed to be the habit of violent attacks in the country. The following day, various shops looted, buildings burnt, and many killed.
They started attacking us inside the studio. I had to cut off the show, and we couldn't go up. We can't continue the show right now. I don't even know what to do.
TVC Communications was not left out of the debacle, with its head office in Lagos burned to the ground by persons unidentified. BRT buses were burnt at their terminals, the palace of the Oba of Lagos looted and burnt, and many more public infrastructure like traffic lights destroyed. Police stations were invaded, with many weapons stolen. Governor of Lagos State, Babajide Sanwo-Olu, disclosed that Lagos will need up to 1 trillion naira to rebuild destroyed infrastructure.
I would say that they were lacking, not in zeal, not in the sense of patriotism, but they seemed to be lacking in experience. And that had to do again with the nature of organization of the EndSars team, which ultimately, I mean, at the initial stage, people felt was okay, it was a good thing, there was no central leadership. And I think that the essence of not having a central leadership was the fear of sabotage, was the fear of a sellout.
The lessons from that protest is gradually getting lost on us. You must have started hearing again police brutality. You've seen videos. I saw one where a policeman in Okene Aziz, was said to have brought down a passenger from a vehicle. I saw him slap the passenger unprovoked. And then the passenger was taken to ATM and he was forced to pay 25,000. Issues like this, how do we address it? But let us look at solutions to the issue.
Judicial panels of inquiry were set up by state governments as a means to serve justice to victims. The Lagos State Judicial Panel of Inquiry and Restitution for Victims of SARS-related abuses was set up on October 19, 2020, to receive and evaluate public complaints of police brutality and extrajudicial killings, and to recommend compensation for victims and officers for prosecution.
Yes, EndSars panel has been sitting. Commendably, some of the victims have received monetary compensations. But how many persons, how many perpetrators of these violations, these abuses have been brought to account? And how come that every day we continue to record the same abuses, the same violations, the same brutalities that have led to EndSars?
It's a protest for survival, and people have felt the brutality of police. The thing is that Nigerians want to make all sorts of theories and whatever. But you know what I always say to Nigerians? Yesterday's victims were once survivors. Today's victims were yesterday's survivors. Tomorrow's victims will be today's survivors. And let's also know that those who have been killed by SARS will not be killed again. They are already dead. The next to be killed are those of us who are alive. And the question I always ask is, who is next? Because the victim card is going around. It is looking for who to follow. And being a victim in Nigeria today is no longer a matter of if, it's a matter of when.
EndSars was a momentous occasion in the history of in our political history, and we need to mark it to ask ourselves questions: what were the lessons, what were the opportunities that have missed?
The EndSars protest will be remembered for many reasons. It was a time when Nigerians came together to speak with one voice against police mistreatment and brutality.
Actually, talking about the memories of EndSars, yes. And I think as this is the first year, I think this the date October 20 cannot be erased from the country's dictionary. It will be a day that people will always remember, and it's like a turning point for so many things.
And for some of us too, October 21 can't be forgotten, because it was that day that a good number of buildings were looted, were destroyed. Yes, some were destroyed the day before, but a good number of them, because they continued the destruction into the next day.
Yes. And the aftermath of the Lekki.
Yes. They claimed that people were massacred, and this and that, Then, remember, we were at work here. And these fellows came, despite the fact that throughout the protests, we were supporting them, we were advising them. We said, look, it was necessary to do something about the police, that these killings were needless. And if people will get up to say, okay, we want to do something about police brutality, of course I will support it, because anybody could be a victim.
Yeah.
But when they stayed for too long on the road, we told them that, look, this thing was getting out of hands. People needed to be rushed to hospital. You deny them access to use the road. The motor boys who live for the day, it is what they earn on a given day that they used to feed themselves. They could not move around freely. It was those boys that largely caused this whole the hijack.
Fifth colonists.
Yes,
because some people came.
The boys were a lot of those motor boys had initially even tried to disrupt the protests. They failed. They repelled the attack. So they then decided to go and join the protesters and then carried out this destruction. So yes, and at the end of the day, the whole protest.
What has EndSars got to do with BRT buses of 100 million naira?
Each of them, the cheapest of them.
Today I was passing through Pennsylvania. You need to see the garage that was destroyed. They have started renovating it. Each of them knows how much amount of money with the technology that was put inside it, raised it down.
Because you have the red buses in Beggar bus stop.
Bus stop. And
yes.
The one at Oyibo bus stop, about 57 of such brand new buses that are yet to be put to use. I think it is unfortunate that the very first time in the history of Nigeria when you have supposedly ideological protest against a bad system, we now had hoodlums who hijacked that thing because it was an ideological process against the system.
And there was nothing wrong about it.
There was nothing wrong about that because it was purely ideological about the system, about the systemic rot.
See, this is how our studio looks now.
1 year after. Let's talk about buildings, properties looted and destroyed. Can Lagos and other cities recover from this?
It will take decades for Lagos especially to recover. It will take decades. Lagos must have lost up to £1 trillion, a trillion naira to these destructions. And Lagos asked for help from the federal government, but we all know that even the federal government is gasping. So where will Lagos find all of that money? Look at, I read a story today that at least 20 of the police stations that were destroyed have remained like that.
Yes.
Look at the one in Pennsylvania.
It's still like that. Who is going
to like that? Because we saw one that Valeke was doing in Ojodu. I think it's close to completing. You know, but I was reading about these destructions and I saw so many of them, so many police stations and outposts. Orile, Igondo, Okoko, Ijorabadia, Agbara, Meron, Cement, Amukoko, Layeni, Lasamaja, Sele outposts under Ijesha division, Ikotun, Aja, Ebutero, Onipanu, Pesni, Mama Kinde, Isokoko, Alade, Igwerin, Bagada, Onilekere, Charlie Boy Police App, Ojodu, Surulere, Makoko, Idimu, Denton, Olosan, Ayelegun Police Outpost, under Ejigbo, Daleko Police Post. There are still others. Look at how many they are in just one state.
One state alone.
They destroyed all. If they were going after, a lot of those boys did it simply to free some of their mates who were in detention. One of the things that gives me joy is that they couldn't at what's it called, the one in that Adekunle area, what's that Panti. They could not penetrate the Panti. The deputy commissioner of police in charge of Panti and his men, they stood firm, because if they had succeeded in releasing detainees at Panti is the most strategic in Lagos when it comes to crime fighting.
Criminals.
That's where they first take them to, and they had many of them in that place. So they were trying to take control of that place, but the policemen resisted. This IG has to reward all of the people who took part, because even some policemen, I'm aware, as someone not far away from the police, that even some police from DPOs that their station, they overran their police posts and stations. They promoted them. So those guys who stood firm, who put their lives on the line in Panti and stopped these brigands from overrunning Panti, which will have been a big shame to everyone, they need, from top to bottom, they need to be rewarded.
The buildings, they even went to Igbo magistrate courts, where you had records of dozens of cases.
Very modern building for that matter. That Lagos State a bit. Well, I think there's something that is missing, not this thing. This is the very first time I see a government who have not been able to sit down and actually evaluate the costs of this thing to Nigeria as a country. I'm talking of both emotional, physical, and the financial cost. By this time, the federal government should have come out with how much was lost, irrespective of whether it was an indictment in the bad system. But we have to know how much was lost so that we can know how to address and how to actually solve the problem. But up to today, the federal government, these various state governments know how much they have lost. But the federal government has not come out to say this is what was lost to the EndSars protest in terms of the physical damage, in terms of the material. Besides the emotional casualties, when I say emotional casualties, I mean those people who have thousands of shops in Lekki, in Agege, in Ikeja, ShopRite, thousands of shops, expensive shops that can never be retrieved again. So
some politicians had their houses destroyed
along that area. You can imagine the amount of money that have been lost, the amount of jobs that have been lost, the amount of homes that have been set back. He was talking about the fact that Lagos State, it could take years. Yes, it is a setback because the money that should have been used to provide further services for the good people of Lagos State, it will be used to fix, to make an attempt to fix. They cannot succeed in fixing all. That we are talking about trillions of naira. Look at the 57 BRT buses that were yet to be put to use and they were burnt one day. How much would you think that cost?
So I think the cheapest of them is about 100 million.
So I think the government has to come out in order to solve the problem because this is systemic. Let us know
the system was so good to the extent that people will park their cars, they will go inside the BRT so that because air conditioned, they will go to Lagos Island, they will sleep before they get to their offices. They will charge their phones right
inside the
BRT.
God forbid. Yesterday
they were clean.
I was at
very clean,
not like the Molwe or this.
No.
Yesterday I was at the Babatunde Fashola train station yesterday. And somebody was asking, I took a photograph, is this Nigeria or London? God forbid that the thing was not ready by then. They must have made a mess out of it.
Thank God that it was
not
ready.
Thank God.
Yes,
thank God that it was not ready. They have made a mess of that. Because when you get to that station,
in
you can compare it.
There's a cinema that was commissioned by former Governor Ambode in Oregon here. That cinema with the new equipment, state-of-the-art equipment, vandalized, destroyed. That building is in shambles now.
So
the boys were simply mad, so they were just going after.
This was
so that means the number of those guys in the system, it should be a source of worry to us, Jide.
No, it's a time bomb. It's a time bomb.
You know that
like
time?
The boy, the little idiot who called himself DPO. Who was wearing a DPO's oversized DPO. That boy, there are many like that who are just roaming the streets of Lagos, no job. Some of them have they can't even say they have parents anymore.
At all.
They've left their homes, they live under the bridge. They belong to cult groups because Lagos is now like the cult capital of our country.
Cult capital?
Yes. They belong to cult groups. Lagos, Akwa Ibom, so many cult groups. I don't know what they are doing.
How many was lost? It was PDSC, the cult groups. They struck in Akwa Ibom yesterday. In Bayelsa.
Yes. No. Cultism
It's almost the way of life.
I said now in Lagos, you find even at the level of junior secondary, people already joining cults.
Even primary
professional groups, for organizer.
All those things. They are into it.
For organizers and other people, they set up cult groups. You know, it's a time bomb. Unemployment. Look at the boy. You know, so it's they were hailing him
after killing.
But you see the police. You got to respect the police. When this boy was dancing, I said they will catch this boy. This police. When you go against one of their own, or you kill a policeman, that is when you know that when the Nigerian police wants to be effective, they will be extra effective. They will get hold of all of you. Now they got the boy.
We'll take this breather. When we come back, it's still our special edition on a year after the EndSars protest. We'll be right back. This is journalist Hangout. We're reaching you live from TVC here in Lagos, and 365 days after that, a year after the EndSars bloody protests around the country, I still have Baba Jide Kolade, Otitoju, and Tunde Abaton in the studio. Jide, we're looking at the gains from this EndSars protest?
Well, I think that one of the gains is the investigative panels that the president told the governors to set up, so that people who are victims of police brutality can get compensation and all that. They can tell their stories. That's one of the gains. The other gain is the fact that that terrible police unit, the people demanded that it should be scrapped, and it's been scrapped. It is a fact that within the police, we still have bad eggs who are behaving more or less like the same SARS people.
Not different.
But it is work in progress. We just hope that we can progressively improve the attitude of our policemen. It's not something that can happen in one day.
Well, I think we have to, it's unfortunate that we are mentioning the fact that when the president got elected, one of the promises he made was that there would be fundamental reform of the police system in Nigeria. Because this thing is systemic. If it is not systemic, it will not get to a stage whereby an ideological protest that was staged against a system now became the very thing that is destroying that particular system. Now, a year after, one would have expected that the government will have come out with more far-reaching things, because we have to reform the minds of the system. It's not a question of allocating money to the police, or a question of building structure.
Start from training.
But we have to train. We have to train them with the kind of society we have.
Some of what we saw yesterday.
We'll still get there.
Yeah.
No, apart from the call for the scrap of the Special Anti-Robbery Squad, SARS, by the EndSars protesters as a result of the wanton brutality, one key demand of the youths is police reform 1 year down the line. How far has the country gone with this task? Jide?
Well, when the whole EndSars thing began, the president yielded to the demand of the youth, and he set up a committee saddled with the task of setting up parameters for the reform of the police. Our friend Chukwuma, Innocent Chukwuma, the late Innocent Chukwuma, was one of the members of that group, that committee, and we were happy, you know. But when this whole thing happened, and people were and places were being destroyed and all that, I said it that that people, what they wanted in the end will not be achieved.
Okay, so before we go to this one now, let me take you back to yesterday. What happened yesterday? Still talking about police reform. And yesterday we saw that in spite of all the noise about EndSars and in spite of what the police promised, we thought we were going to see a level of civility and a cordial relationship between the police and even the protesters. But yesterday, the visuals we've been seeing, the videos we've been seeing, has not been encouraging at all. It's as if...
clearly the police, again, demonstrated a high level of irresponsibility yesterday. Those things, journalists are at a scene, they are not harmed.
At all.
They had their drones, they were taking shots, and then you are grabbing people, grabbing their drones and all that. What's going on? You are still spraying pepper spray on people's faces. That means that there are still elements within the police, because you see where the EndSars people lost it. And I'm sure those young people, if they can think, they will see that they had the good struggle, that by their hands they destroyed it. EndSars activists would have been part of the screening, the profiling of the bad eggs within the police, because that was a demand that they made, that those bad eggs should be fished out, and they wanted to play a role in ensuring that that happened. But the moment this whole thing was hijacked, because they would not leave the streets at the time when they were making life unbearable for people by occupying the streets, then government stopped having anything to do with even the demands that were made. They made a demand in respect of even the salaries of the police. What do we have now? Remember that Ashwa Tinubu warned them that, look, the government has listened to you. Leave the roads and continue the engagement. The engagement, if they had continued, it would have led us to achieve even this reform. Their own members and friends were in those reforms. They were in that committee. That committee will have continued this work. They too will have been able to monitor the work of the committee. But everything was lost to the fact that So this is the thing. Yesterday we saw the police behave true to type. Every opportunity to humiliate unarmed civilians, the Nigerian police always gets excited about it. This is the same police that the number one training facility for the mobile police. Boko Haram not only overran the place in Goza, Boko Haram took about 14 policemen as hostage, and we can't remember even what happened to them. So instead of flexing muscles against people who are not armed, the police must remember that it is responsible to the civil populace. That's the way they should first think. You must not first think that, oh, I'm superior to this person because I'm wearing a uniform. No. The moment you are consumed by that notion, you will never behave responsibly when you see civilians. You will think that civilians, they are bloody civilians, let us crush them. That's what we saw again yesterday. How can you, John? Why are you knew that journalists must cover, even policemen too will be waiting to, those of them who are not on the field, they'll be waiting to read reports about what happened in Lekki. Were they expecting that nobody will go and cover the thing? Why are you harassing people?
Well, yesterday, were you impressed with their conduct?
Well, I think, you see, they have a deflated ego, the Nigerian police force. And like I said, until we reform the system, because in those days, before you can join the police force, they must know your background, the family you are coming from. But it will appear as if to every fresh intake into the Nigerian police force, they have a misperception that they are not to serve the people. It's supposed to be Nigeria police service, not a Nigeria police force that is supposed to coerce people. Yesterday, one young man, Uber driver, he drove somebody to Lekki Toll Gate and they seized his telephone, did every other thing to him, because the man was trying to earn a living. So unfortunately, like I said, until there is a systemic reform and seriousness by the government, yes, we may say that the EndSars protesters lost the team of that particular essay, but a year after, it is enough for the government, if the government is serious, to take a second look at the Nigerian police system. It is the system that is wrong. Until you take a look at that system and do the normal reform in that system, we will continue to have policemen like this. You know, between 1979 and 83, why the military struck against the police was that they believed that the police led by Adewusi was becoming too powerful. Yes, it was even still responsible then, but the police of today cannot be described as being responsible in the way they are handling citizens, because the police cannot be there if the citizens are not paying their tax. You cannot earn your salary. But they have reduced Nigerians to the perpetual slaves. And they want an African Nigerian to see a police officer and begin to run.
And they say the police is your friend.
And they say the police is your friend.
Somebody who is brutalizing you, how can you be happy to have him as your friend?
They have to change their own perception and the ego, the deflated ego that they have. They have an ego.
Some people are even clamoring that they change that name, Nigerian Police Force.
It's not a force. It should not be a force. It's a service. There was a time 5 years ago they changed it.
Custom.
But the custom is a service, not a force.
Human rights lawyer Inibe Effiong joins us via Zoom for more discussion on this knotty issue. Inibe,
thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure as always.
Happy EndSars anniversary.
I shouldn't ask you where you were yesterday.
Oh yes, we were very busy with the engagement, trying to have conversations around the anniversary.
Okay, now straight to the matter now. How necessary is police reform at this time, Nibe?
Well, I've listened carefully to the discussion so far. I appreciate the sentiment that has been expressed, especially by Mr. Babajide. But you know, I will only say that I can only speak in the language of my generation. There is a reason why this protest took place in the first place. And I think that is the starting point. Because except we are honest as a country about the fact that EndSars was a product of failure of governance, failure of leadership, it will be very difficult to underscore the anger of young people against the police or the SARS during the EndSars agitation. We had a history where young persons were being profiled, people were being slaughtered, people were being killed. It is still happening to date. A situation where the Special Anti-Robbery Squad had basically, it became a special, murder squad.
Execution squad.
A special execution squad. A special robbery. Instead of anti-robbery, it became a special robbery squad, where SARS went about in a larger-than-life attitude. In fact, you will confirm that when SARS was in existence, if you want to intimidate your neighbor, your friend, your colleague, or someone who is owing you, all you needed to say was that I'm going to invite SARS. So there was this climate of fear and impunity that pervaded that agency. But let's not be mistaken, as I've said. SARS was a reflection of the general decay in the police, and of course the general decay in the country. That was why I'm going to your question, why people felt the need for the police to be reformed. I do concede that the EndSars movement and protest, just like any other protest, was not a perfect one. A few mistakes were made. I do also condemn, and I've always taken a position that the violence that took place was not necessary, especially the attack on media organizations and businesses. That was totally unacceptable. But we must also go further to ask the question, who was responsible for this attack? I took part in the EndSars protest. I marched on the street of Lagos. Nobody can say Inibere is a hoodlum, or that I destroyed somebody's property, or that I kill anybody. The same applies to millions and thousands of Nigerians who went out peacefully to demand a reform to the police. But the question is, what was the response? We saw how the protest was going. At the point, the government became very impatient, very intolerant with that movement. They felt that it was assuming a political dimension, or as some people falsely insinuated that it was an attempt to overthrow President Buhari, which was not the truth. That was why the military was deployed to the toll gate. And you will agree with me, Ayo, that at least for Lagos, the carnage, the violence, the anarchy that we all saw started gaining momentum after the tragic event of October 20th, 2020, when the military opened fire on innocent protesters at the toll gate. Before that time, you can prove me wrong, I am not aware of any police station that was burned in Lagos State. In fact, at the panel of inquiry, I was present. General Taiwo, who testified on behalf of the military, considered that all the evidence of destruction they brought took place after the attack at the toll gate. Was that a justification? The answer is no. But what has been done? Let me
just ask you here.
Let's go to the reform, issue of reform.
Yes, on the reform now.
What kind of changes do you want to see? You and your clients, you have to deal with the police all the time. Given the character of the police that you are familiar with, what kind of reforms do you want to see?
The first thing that we want to see is a culture of accountability. As I speak to you right now, despite the promises of the federal government, of the National Economic Council, there is still this pervasive impunity in the police. People are still being slaughtered and people are still being killed. And I can cite to you a very recent one, a case in Akwa Ibom, a fresh graduate of architecture, Kubiataisi, who was tortured and killed in custody 2 months ago. He was taken in the night for committing no offense, very healthy, murder. His brain was brutalized. He died in custody till date. That police officer has not been dismissed. He has not been prosecuted. In Lagos here, we have also seen how a young lady was shot and killed during protests. Other people are still being killed across the country. The extortion has not stopped. So let us start with accountability. Now go to even police welfare. the president promised that he had ordered increment in their salary. I don't know whether that has taken effect. But how many police formations, how many police quarters have been renovated? Because this also goes to their modus operandi. These people are raised in an environment that is not fit for human habitation. Go to police cells, Mr. Babajide Ayo. Go to police cells. Go and see the condition under which people are being detained, including in Lagos State, the cosmopolitan city of Lagos. Nothing to write home about. People are still being extorted as I speak to you. Even as at today, as at yesterday, I am still receiving reports of people being extorted for bail across the country. So this impunity has not stopped. So when we see Nigerians being so disgruntled, it is because we have not seen any honest effort to reform.
So moving forward now, anyway, I would like to ask you what steps can be taken to ensure that we eradicate cases of police brutality and killings?
The first step is for the president, because I don't believe the police can reform itself. It has to take the leadership of the president. The National Assembly has done a lot, I must concede, with the passage of the Police Act of 2020, with the passage of the Anti-Torture Act of 2017, with the passage of the Administration of Criminal Justice Act, and so on and so forth. These laws have been put in place to ensure that suspects' rights are respected. In Lagos, for example, the House of Assembly also passed a law recently, the new SCJL, stopping parade of suspects. Ayo, has it stopped? It has not. Let the president of the country decide today that this impunity has to stop. Let a policy be made that any state in this country where somebody is killed in police custody, where extrajudicial killing is reported, that the commissioner of police of that state will be removed. Ayo, let that pronouncement be made today and implemented. You will see spontaneous reform. They told us that we will no longer see policemen without uniform. At the toll gate, during the memorial, I saw videos of policemen still wearing jeans. The commissioner of police was there, he did nothing. And he's still coming out to say people cannot protest. The commissioner for information said, oh, that the governor, the CP is not listening to the governor. Why has the CP of Lagos not been redeployed? Why have they not been removed? So when you have this impunity going on, let the president take action. Until that is done, you cannot blame people.
Okay, finally,
and
before I allow you to go,
there will be compensation for victims. Till today, the federal government has not set a one kobo. Thankfully, Lagos has set a precedent. How about the federal government? How about the other states? Not one kobo has been set aside by other states
now,
as
the president has set up a committee. The president has set up a committee, to look at the set up modalities for reforming the police. It will seem that it is no longer on government's agenda at this time. What do you think is going on?
We don't need a committee to reform the police. It amounts to dereliction of leadership, of responsibility for the president to say that he needs a committee. What is the purpose of the Police Service Commission? What is the purpose of the National Assembly Committees on Police Affairs? What is the purpose of the Ministry of Interior and Police Affairs? We have a minister that has the responsibility of oversight over the police. Let him be fired. Let the president show leadership. You don't need a committee. You don't need a committee to fix and reform police barracks. You don't need a committee to say that police should not extort.
You have to leave it there.
This is just a distraction. It is a distraction.
Human rights lawyer.
There was a committee in 2018.
We have to thank you. We have to thank you, human rights lawyer Inibe Effiong. Thank you for your contribution today. Jide, we're still talking about police reform. Quickly.
Yeah, I think that when we are talking about reforming the police, we have to look at the funding of the police. We've got to do something about it.
Quick.
The recruitment and promotion in the police, the training and reorientation of the staff, the welfare and condition of service of the police, and then the need to strengthen disciplinary processes within the police. If we do not do that, we will not be able to go far. Policemen have to be constantly evaluated in terms of their professional competence and capability from time to time. And those who misbehave, as they often do, they need to be shown.
And one very important point,
if we don't show them the door.
One very important point you mentioned here now: insulation from partisan control.
Yes, we've got to
professional police.
We will never have a police of our dream when some police commissioner or the IG thinks that, oh, it is the government of the day.
Yes.
That he has to show his loyalty to. Maybe that's why in some countries, even the president cannot appoint the Inspector General of Police. Maybe we'll get there someday, because there is evidence that the police is not apolitical. And that is one reason we were afraid of state police, that it could get worse. If we have state police, if from what we are seeing, if we now have state police, that could get worse. That's the fear that many people have.
Finally, Abaton, who do we blame for the often hostile attitude of police towards the citizens?
Well, I think the police too were brought up in a very hostile environment. Like he said, go to an average police barracks. They have children. Their children were brought up under a particular system. When they leave school, some of them enroll in the police force.
Yes.
What do you expect for them to give to the society that brought them up in a rat, in a hole? So the thing is that, in Nigeria, people keep on talking about the fact that the president should act. It has been there for 6 years. We have the Ministry of Police Affairs, Abi. We have the Police Service Commission. Those two institutions are enough to have a reform of the police system.
Yes.
Well, we have the next 16 months, the president will leave office. I think Nigeria should not expect anything from this government if this government has spent 6 years. And one of the promises made by President Muhammadu Buhari was to reform the Nigerian police. And he has spent 6 years in office. I think the people who want to rule Nigeria in 2023, they should start putting their acts together.
They too will make that promise. They too will make that promise.
They will make that promise. The problem we have is that it's when people get to office in Nigeria that they begin to think of solutions to problems in which they campaigned for. One would have expected the president to have had the blueprint for the police, but he has no blueprint and he has spent 6 years there.
Funding is a major thing today.
No, funding is the biggest problem in my view.
Right now, apart from those state governors, just remove
without those state
governors in Nigeria,
from the Nigerian police
is nothing.
I don't know what the police will look like.
The police is not
without
those state governors.
In
spite of the two commissions, two institutions we have, Police Service Commission, Ministry of Police Affairs,
the patrol vans that they use
is legal. Look at how much Lagos State is spending.
Governments that are providing them. Federal government simply pay salary.
APC, everything.
Yes.
You want to buy uniform, they buy it themselves.
So yes, a lot of them buy their uniform by
themselves. For you to get torchlight,
and now you don't want them to be corrupt. You don't want them to stand by the roadside and extort.
You post a police corporal from Bauchi, post him down to Lagos. There's nowhere for him to sleep.
Yes.
From Bauchi down to Lagos.
That has been happening for some time.
It has been happening for a long time, and you want a reform. You want a change in the attitude.
Tunde Abaton, thank you for your contribution. And BKO, God bless us. TVC shall rise again.
Yes, TVC refused to stay down.
Yeah.
We have risen like the phoenix, and we shall remain on top.
On the third day, we started our transmission back.
We started the transmission
of October
with journalist Hangout.
Yes.
We bounced back with journalist Hangout when this Carnage
they thought they could kill the vision.
Yeah, you can't.
You can't kill a vision.
They are too small to kill TVC. We are where we are now, and we know that our future will be better than our past. That's where we are. Every time I see this building, my blood boils. But there is nothing as good as a man's strong will. That strength of character has brought us where we are today, and is taking us to a much better place. I'm confident about that. Nigerians should not despair. We are going to a much better place.
The glory of the latter shall be greater than that of the former. So, TVC.
So shall it be.
Yeah.
A
million, and that's our offering today.
1 million hectoliters of anointing.
Yes, sir.
It's going with that.
Yes, sir. Yes. Join us tomorrow for another episode of the program. You can watch the repeat broadcasts tonight at 11. And don't forget to join us on Sunday, 1:30 p.m. to 3:30 p.m. We're on YouTube, youtube.com/TVC News Nigeria. I'm Ayodele Zubakun. See you on Sunday, 1:30 p.m.